Hey everybody, my name is Anthony Ruttgaizer, and I am the creator and writer of Heroes of Homeroom C. You're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast on a podcast purveyor near you.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to celebrate Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Anthony Ruttgaizer about his new Kickstarter project, Heroes of Homeroom C. Based in Toronto, Ontario, Anthony Ruttgaizer is a professional wrestler, podcaster, radio host, nightclub DJ, and voiceover artist. Relevant to this podcast, however, Anthony's also a comic book writer and occasional cartoonist, best known for such works as the all-ages graphic novel series Heroes of Homeroom C, superhero comics The First Hero and Actionverse, and the monster apocalypse neo-western Chance for Survival. Heroes of Homeroom C features the tales of Nicola and Albert Hathaway, twin 12-year-old African-American superheroes who lose their powers and get sent back to public school to try to have a normal life. But even in the small-town paradise of tranquil Massachusetts, the kids find themselves caught up in danger and excitement. So, without further ado, here's my chat with Anthony Ruttgaizer about his new Kickstarter project, Heroes of Homeroom C. So, Anthony Ruttgaizer, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thank you for taking time to chat with me, John.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, always a pleasure. But before we get going with all the questions, I would like to know, what are you reading today?
Mostly emails that I myself am writing and comic books. I have the trade paperback of Robin Year One that is sitting here, and I need to give that some serious time later today.
Sounds like a plan. Absolutely. You got to devote some time to reading every day. I was just going through my notes and my website. I remember the first time we met was almost 10 years ago, if you can believe that. Time flies.
I can. Time is cruel.
And back then, we were talking about a comic book called Heroes of Homeroom C. I understand that you might have some news for fans of that story. Wonder if you could share that with us.
Yeah, as we are recording this, I have launched a Kickstarter that is covering the new edition of Volume 1. Since we spoke, that first edition sold out a couple of months ago. I cobbled together a new edition, a second edition of Volume 1, and we are working on Volume 2. I reassembled the team of Carlos Granda and Fred Stressing and brought in Jamal Eigel for covers. We're working on Heroes of Homeroom C Volume 2 as we speak. We are 54 pages into a 76-page story. Carlos is shooting to have the line art complete before the end of the Kickstarter campaign. Later this summer, there will be a brand new Hathaway twins adventure in people's hands.
That sounds exciting. Absolutely. Maybe for people who aren't familiar with the story, maybe you can bring us up to speed.
Heroes of Homeroom C is an all-ages graphic novel series about Albert and Nicola Hathaway, twin 12-year-old superheroes who lose their powers and their parents send them back to public school. And this is about the new adventures that they have as first-time middle school students.
So who is the audience for this story? Like, I go into Walmart and I go into the bookstores and I see kids are just ravenous for these graphic novels about kids their own age and seeing themselves in books. Who ultimately are you writing this for?
Ultimately for me, because I came up with the idea for the story and I loved it enough to want to do it. But as far as readership goes, it's ages 8 and up. I don't want to dumb down any of the dialogue. I grew up with being instilled with the mentality of, if you don't understand a word, go grab a dictionary or ask somebody what it means. I want to do the same with kids. I want kids to read this and enjoy a very cool story, but B, I want it to be part of them fostering their own love of reading and reading comprehension and spark their imaginations at the same time.
Now, you mentioned this is a Kickstarter project. I'm wondering, can you talk a little bit about the incentives for those who decide to back your project?
Yeah, I've kept the incentives pretty simple this time around. There are print and digital versions of both volumes one and two. There's what we're calling the Sector X source book, which is like if you remember the Marvel Universe series or the Who's Who in DC series, where it was kind of an encyclopedia of the characters. We're doing the Sector X source book, which will be bios of a bunch of the characters in the book and some of the characters that have been mentioned but never seen because they're from Albert and Nicola's superhero past. There's also a sketch cover version of that source book. So if you want to be drawn as a Sector X agent, the government team that supported Nicola and Albert when they were superheroes, think about all those in the G.I. Joe cartoon, all those guys in basic green uniform, army uniforms that used to carry laser rifles and run in behind Gung Ho and Stalker. That's you can be drawn as one of those on the cover of your very own source book. We have enamel pins. We have, oh, here's a thing. For the source book, I have a few artists that I'm lining up to do some of those illustrations, some of those character illustrations. And James Edward Clark, who is the artist on the suddenly very popular Florida Hippopotamus Cocaine Massacre series with Fred Kennedy, he has drawn one of them. Roberto Duke from Edmonton, who I did a story with that I don't know if I can talk about it right now for another comic, not our own. He's going to be doing one of the illustrations for me. I have some stuff from Carlos, our series artist. I have a few that I'll draw myself. I have a couple coming from the sketchbooks of the late beloved Lee Moder that will be in the source book. So James Edward Clark and Roberto Duke, their original drawings are going to be tiers in the campaign. You'll be able to get that original art with one of the reward tiers.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. A little bit of something for everyone and definitely an incentive in the true
Yeah,
meaning to go get on board with this project.
I hope so.
Yeah. So you've been talking about the Heroes of Homeroom C. Can you talk about anything else you have on the go? Is this taking up pretty much all your time?
Well, for the next month it will, but I have a new book that I've just printed called The Last Mammal on Earth. It's about a woman living completely alone in the abandoned city of Toronto. And she starts to get the sense that she might not be alone after all. It's a 40-page one shot written by me, drawn by a very excellent London, Ontario artist named Elsbeth Dodman. We finished this book and I sent it to print. I loved Elsbeth's art so much that I almost immediately contacted her again and said, I have another script. Would you like to work on this? And we're working on another book. I won't talk too much about that one, but it's called Last Stand in Open Country. I'm hoping that'll be ready probably for the new year, taking our time on it. But Last Mammal is available, and fantastic cover by Montreal artist Jimmy Suzanne. I have a phone call I have to make later today because there's a project that I've been talking about for a while that I want to officially get started on, and that is an art book dedicated to the life and art of the aforementioned Lee Moder. Yeah, I have some other things on the go.
Yeah, you're not standing still, that's for sure. And speaking of that, I saw on social media that you ventured out and went to the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, and I was there as well. I think we missed each other though, but I thought it was a great event. Want to get your thoughts? What did you think of the whole thing?
I think it's a great show in general. I thought they did a much better job this year than last year. For those who don't know, the Toronto Comic Arts Festival is a large free admission comic art show that for years now has taken place at the Toronto Central Reference Library. But the library it wasn't available last year, it's not available this year. I think it's going to be 1 or 2 years before it would be available. I don't know if they'll go back. They've moved to the Academy Athletic Center, what used to be Maple Leaf Gardens. So last year there's growing pains moving into a new place and figuring things out. I think they did a much better job just with the layout of the show this year. Last year, it was very, very hard to move around through some aisleways. And I think they did a much better job this year. Might sound like a small thing, but really you're dealing with the comfort of your patrons, the ability for them to move around and look at tables without impeding other people's process is incredibly important. And if somebody comes and they don't enjoy that user experience, we'll come back. That was all corrected this year. When you already have a really great product and you can improve your presentation or your packaging, then it's win-win. So that might not be the answer you were looking for, but to me, that kind of thing is really important.
Sure. That's very valid. Absolutely. You saw some great creators there and lots of great talent, that's for sure. And actually, this leads to my next question. You were just talking about presenting yourself. Brand is always important. And as an expert on brand building, I wonder, maybe you could pass along just a tip or two of advice for people who are up and coming, want to get into the comic book business. What sort of brand advice would you give to them?
Well, expert might be a little handed of a statement, but during the pandemic, I went back to school for digital media marketing. One of the first things I always say to independent comic creators, any kind of creator really, is put together a mailing list. Now, I haven't always been good at this because of my own anxieties, is maintaining that connection with your audience. And I'm trying to make a concerted effort. I had a friend of mine, a professional wrestler named Rico Montana. And Rico used to, going back 15 years, Rico used to tell people to put aside a block of time each week, a half hour, an hour, whatever you can manage, to respond to fans who were sending messages via social media. And I think for creators, a version of that is to establish a mailing list and use something like Email Octopus or MailChimp or some mailing service that you can send out newsletters. Jim Zub is incredible at this. Jim Zub sends out really fantastic newsletters. And if you only do it once a month, that's still good. Let people know what you're working on and establish a bond. I have, after a few years of not doing that, I have started a new mailing list and have started sending out what hopefully will be newsletters to let people know what I'm working on, where I'm going to be, and just what's up, what I'm doing. So build your audience, even if it's one person at a time, through an emailing list, because you are contacting them directly. Okay, that's going to their email address. That is as close as you're going to get to phoning somebody directly or texting them directly. Send them an email. They have a choice whether or not they want to read it or unsubscribe or dive headfirst into it. But it can be a slow and steady process, but you're building your audience.
We just talked about TCAF, but I'm wondering, will you be attending any other events this year to promote your books?
Yeah, this is going live on Friday. So if you're listening to this first day, then tomorrow, June the 13th, I'll be in Mississauga at the Gotham City Comics Creators Collectors Market. First weekend of July, 3rd and 5th, I'll be in Montreal for Montreal Comic Con. Then, as far as I know, good Lord willing, I will be at Fan Expo Canada at the end of August. And fingers crossed, if you have backed the Heroes of Homeroom C Kickstarter, you will very likely be able to pick up volumes 1 and 2 at my table in Artist Alley at Fan Expo Canada.
Sounds good. So what we should do is actually let people know where they can find out more about you and the Kickstarter.
Yeah, my website is ruttgaizer.com, RUTTGAI.com. zer.com, Z-E-R, if you're an American listening to this. There's links on there to all my social media. Most of my social media, you can find me at Instagram and YouTube and such at My Name is Kingdom. And the Kickstarter itself, I have a dedicated URL for my Kickstarters, and that is kickstartthiscomic.com. So if you go to kickstartthiscomic.com, or if you just go to Kickstarter and you search for my name, Anthony Ruttgaizer, or you search for Heroes of Homeroom C, you'll come across the current Kickstarter campaign.
Sounds good. Well, Anthony, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering, is there something I didn't ask that you want to get across in this interview?
I want to express preemptive gratitude to everybody who even visits the Kickstarter campaign, whether you pledge or not. I hope that if you take a look at the campaign and you think, man, not quite for me, that maybe you'll think of one or two people, circle of friends or your family who would enjoy it, people with kids or people who just enjoy a good story, and pass the information on to them. And very special thanks to everybody who, over the next month, makes a pledge to help make these books come into existence.
Thanks to Anthony for the chat. You can discover more about Anthony online at anthonyruttgaizer.com and on Instagram at MyNameIsKingdom. You can discover more about Heroes of Homeroom C at Kickstart This Comic and on Kickstarter. And thank you for tuning in to the True North Country Comics podcast. I invite you to visit the True North Country Comics website to listen to even more conversations with creators about making comic books and graphic novels. You can follow along True North Country Comics on most social media platforms, and you're encouraged to send any and all feedback to John at truenorthcountrycomics.com. Thanks for tuning in, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2026.